Welcome to the only brother-sister podcast built for teachers, by teachers, Dumplings Over Flowers.
I'm the sister, Nicole.
And I'm the brother, Izzy.
And this podcast is here to take you on a backstage tour of our combined 50 years of experience teaching so that we can help you recognize and celebrate substance over appearance.
Or dumplings over flowers. Yeah. Well, Waterman, spin the wheel.
Ask me what we're talking about today.
What are we talking about today?
Well, Waterman, this just in from Waterman. Last day, first keys.
Wow.
Which is a story that I love hearing. And I
Isn't it first keys last day?
I don't know. Is it?
I think it is.
Okay. Waterman?
Yeah, it's first day. It's first keys last day.
Well, you might be able to tell it's not my story because I didn't really know the real title. This is one of Izzy's stories. Let's hear it.
So, one of the things that I got very excited about, and maybe you can relate, was the time where I got the keys to the room, right? So, got my first classroom, was setting it up. In fact, I think there might be pictures that you can see at the end of this of Nicole, a very young Nicole.
That classroom.
Helping me set up my very first classroom, along with my mother and father, sisters. I was that guy, 22-year-old. But I do remember having the keys, and I was told that if we lose the keys, they have to rekey the entire building, because it's like, so security blah,
yep.
blahs and all that good stuff. So I was petrified. So it always stuck with me, that was part of the routine, right? Make sure you pay attention, always know where those keys are and stuff. Cut to a bunch of years later in a very difficult learning environment, let's call it. And
what do you mean?
Well, it was a high needs school
that I
was working in, yeah. And a very, very difficult learning environment. A lot of transition, a lot of turnover in the school. And a big, part of that was really something that we'll get into in this episode now as a result of this topic. But it's really about having proper support, resource, and training that clearly didn't exist for poor old Miss So-and-so, who we will leave nameless, because on her first day, first set of keys, it was also her last day.
No. Yeah. Because of the keys? No,
because of the environment. So worse than the keys. So I was in the assistant principal's office, and it's not funny, but it was a pretty ironic and funny scene. We were talking at the end of the day and just kind of recapping things, and very casually, and in walks Miss So-and-so, and without saying a single word.
Oh, no.
She walked in, put the keys on the desk, walked out, and he said, we looked at each other, and the assistant principal looked up and said, well, I guess that was her last day. And I said, it was also her first. So, yeah, I guess when you know, you know.
And no storming out or anything, just a quiet, calm.
Just the worst kind of storming,
wow.
Which was the quiet, calm. Yeah. And so it always kind of stuck with me. This was probably my maybe 8th year teaching. And I was at a point of emerging leadership, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, it really made me think back about and start to think about, like, how did that go wrong so fast? How could somebody come to that conclusion so quickly? And what could have been done? I was starting at the time to, like I said, kind of emerging leader, but I was in a role where I was the team lead. We used to have pods of 4 teachers, and so we had the larger content areas and the grade level areas and leaders in those regards. And those were the paying jobs. So that wasn't yet where, I was at, but But then there was the team leader, and how things going internally on your team and the across the kids and stuff. And so it really stuck with me, like how, and thankfully Miss So-and-so, by the way, was not on my team. Not thankfully, because I would have felt like a big failure. But I also would have hoped that she was on the team, because the first question should be, how could we have supported that better and created a better environment? So
let me ask you this. Let me stop you. That's a haunting story, and it's certainly not something that I think is uncommon right now. So many teachers. I mean, you're in the Facebook groups. You're in the yeah. Everybody's
first
like,
day, last day.
I can't do this. Wait, what? And it was, to be honest, it wasn't easy before pandemic, but now especially, I think we're seeing the gap between the excitement of the keys and the last day close a little bit. I can remember leaving my keys in the door of my classroom overnight.
What?
And and this is just a little pro tip for you. Everybody always says when you get a job, who should you be the nicest to?
Custodians,
correct.
Secretaries.
So my custodian friend, Bob, the next day came up and said, "Here's your keys.
Oh.
I'll never tell anyone."
Oh, nice.
So thanks. I'll tell everyone on the podcast someday.
Right. But yeah. And if you're out there, Bob.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. No, because it's such a big deal. And the keys are sacred. The keys are sacred. You're right. And so is this job. So if that teacher was on your team and she had come to you and put the keys on your desk in that quiet, weird, calm, turbulence way, what would you have done?
Maybe the AP who had a ton of experience made the right move. But
what did he do?
Nothing.
Right.
But my inclination would immediately be the why, some conversation, the how can we help? And I know that sounds easy. And like I said, now let's hold out the idea that possibly that's the best move, because we got to consider we're talking about stakeholders who are children. And so it's a touchy topic to me, because there is a place that people should be self-aware and understand that, if it's not the right position, if you're not going to be the right person in front of the room for whatever particular reason you don't think it's going to work, figure it out sooner rather than later. I'll say that much. However, teaching is a craft and it's an art, and it's something that is going to require multi attempts, multi reps. It's not a one and done. And so I would really kind of approach it from that level, and most especially try to offer some wisdom and some guidance, I should say, as to how to navigate that space a little differently.
Well, I mean, as your sister, right? I can tell you that I've had that advice from you a few times in my career.
Isn't that our origin story, right? This is episode 1.
This is episode 1.
So maybe we hit that a little bit.
We do. But I could tell you that, throughout the times where I've come to you for advice, it's never been, and I'm sure I wasn't like wordlessly handing over my keys to you, but I know that there have been times where I've been like, I don't know if this is for me. I don't think I'm doing this right. Everybody else around me is fine. Why am I like this? What's happening? What should I do? And I can say that on kind of two sides of the advice coin, people around me were like, oh, well, it's just make it till this day. Just make it till Thanksgiving. Just make it till the turn of the year. Just make it till, so it was about time, which probably speaks to, practice and things like that. And that's not necessarily the wrong advice. But practicing the same thing over and over again is not going to help anybody.
No, not unless you're practicing the correct procedures, right? Practice doesn't make perfect.
Practice makes permanent. Correct.
So we want to work on behaviors and procedures, but the problem is you don't always know them as a young teacher.
Yeah. And, just to give advice like, hey, I don't know what to do here. My
so
class
hang
is
in
breaking
there is
down.
not advice.
Hang in there. The cat on the tree limb is a great poster, not great advice. But it could be.
Great poster though?
It's a great poster. Is that even a real question?
No, everyone knows. No, you're right. You're right. It certainly stood the test of time.
Yeah, clearly.
He's hung in there.
He's hung in there.
Yeah, no doubts.
But it has to be more specific than that. I mean, there would not be a situation where someone would come to me and say, you know, I'm ready to leave. I can't take this, without me saying like, why, like you're saying,
and then figuring
out, right. Yeah. Like and maybe that brings us to our next segment, which would be to say, how can we make this practical instead of just the flowers, instead of the dumpling, right? Like the substance
I gotcha.
over the appearance.
So we work a lot around teacher attrition. We talk about that a lot in our work. And we've found that 67% of the people that leave the field leave, and they cite support, resource, and training, or the lack thereof, as the primary reasons, right? So we all are very familiar, and it's as old as the cat hanging on the poster to understand that we are underpaid and overworked, and you know it does have to be a labor of love, and it's a calling and a mission, and we agree and believe in all that. And that's a topic that might show up on the wheel one day. Waterman, put that on the wheel. In fact, that might be something that we can jump into. And talk about how to find significance and belonging and some joy inside of the facts, not denying the fact. We can accept that, but not coming into agreement with the negative side of that, right? So in this case, we're going back to teacher attrition or burnout, even on first day burnout.
It's a quick burn.
You know, it's a flash in the pan, if I ever heard one. We're looking at support, resource, and training, right? And so in your school, in your experience, now, Nicole, it's well documented that I am much older than Nicole, and it's well documented because she well documented. 11 years older. What the viewers don't know, because how would they? Or maybe they do. Maybe there's some that have heard the story.
Do I know? What?
Of course you
know. I know.
Is that my very first teaching experience, it was a field experience in college, was in Nicole's 6th grade classroom. She was a student in the class. And I believe I made you call me Mr. Galanti, didn't I?
You did, because I can remember saying, Mr. Galanti, Mom made us tuna. And I thought I was so cool to be able to. Mr. Galanti, I have your lunch again.
Yes.
It's a potatoes and eggs hero in a greasy brown paper bag.
Amen to that.
Thanks, Mom.
I hope. Waterman, could you make me a sandwich? Because now I'm hungry.
Leave him alone.
Yeah, do your job. Point being, without, you know, we can categorize it into 3 ways, right? But inside those categories, we might need leadership.
So your categories, you're saying, are support, resources, and training.
Yeah, and I couldn't at certain times say, okay, attend my training, or here's a training. I could maybe, and not really all that much in the early part of my career, guide you in training, let's say, that I received.
Yeah.
Or even have good resources. You were a humanities teacher. I was a STEM teacher, primarily STEAM teacher. And so maybe the resources didn't even jive, but I could support. And I could support in those other ways, maybe pedagogically, maybe
social emotional
support,
for sure.
Right? Just having had different experiences.
And that's not even, I mean, I will say that the resources sometimes are about, you know, if you're thinking about a young new teacher, a young, beautiful new teacher like myself, maybe those resources are like, here's a really great way to make a seating chart. Here's a, you know.
Yeah. So that, funny you should say that. Same school, same team. You know, one of the things to do is to recognize what you do well and help people reproduce that, inspire that action in others. So Mike Pilata, if you're listening, phenomenal teacher, and I'm going to use that name because I know he will want me to. One of my biggest influences, and not just in this way, but this was one of the funny stories I take away. And he would tell me this all the time. I do a few things really well. Those are the things you should copy from me. The rest of it, you're on your own.
When you were teaching with him, was he like a veteran at the time and you were new? Okay.
Well, more importantly, he might have maybe been a couple of years ahead of me in experience, but more importantly, he was in all of his experience was in the learning environment that I walked into, and none of my experience was in that environment.
Right. Okay.
So this was a very urban school, primarily Title I, free and reduced lunch. I mean, very, very
tough,
underserved,
yeah,
community. And I had come from a Long Island private school that was not underserved, had its merits and issues, but totally different set of circumstances. So he was exceptionally well versed in that community and taught me a number of great things, not just 2 or 3. But funny enough, I said, well, I was all ears in that conversation. And I said, well, give me an example. Like, what do you do well? And he said, attendance. Speaking of important things, I don't know if our young viewers, young teachers, emerging teachers, pre-service teachers in the audience are going to recognize what had to happen to make sure that your attendance records were right.
Oh my gosh.
In the pre-computer, LMS.
Oh my
days.
gosh. No.
And one of the most important pieces of that was making sure you had accurate attendance records. And so I said, attendance, like not the mysteries of life. And it turns out it was one of them that I didn't recognize. And he had his clipboards and he had his process and his procedure. He had structure. He had device.
Mm-hmm.
And he had that routine, right?
System, yeah.
And some sort of system.
Oh my gosh. My attendance structure was like, hey, Johnny.
Yeah.
Go fill in those bubbles. Tell me who's absent.
Yeah, mine was basically screaming, quiet so I can take attendance.
Right.
That in the early days. But he had a routine.
Now we're all microchipping the children.
Oh, no, we're not.
No.
Are we?
No.
However, attendance still being important, people scan in. I mean, obviously there's a ton of different ways. Point being, we've got support, resource, and strategy. Support might come in the form of inspiration. This is the thing I do well.
Mm-hmm.
Follow me.
Mm-hmm.
This might be the thing we can establish and do well together, right? So that's support.
And on the flip side of that, it might be that you notice something that you need in somebody and you approach them and say, hey, I noticed you do this well.
I think I hear a call to action coming, Waterman. Because that's perfect. I didn't think, I never thought of my colleagues as the resource.
Right.
When I say resources, I don't think about people.
Especially not in teaching, because I feel like my colleagues, I was in awe. I mean, my first job, I walked into the English office and there was like somebody was playing a guitar and somebody was writing a poem and, things were happening. And I was like, oh God, I just have this stack of books. I don't even know how to read really great. Am I saying this word correctly out loud?
Right.
I knew how to read. That's an overstatement.
I hope.
However,
I
was terrified to ask anybody for help.
Of course. And because, what I've found is that it's such a personal thing, but as an instructional coach, what happens a lot to us, right, Nicole, is, I say right, like I already said it, but what happens to us is people will say, well, you get up and do it.
Right.
If you're
that does
so
happen
good.
A lot.
And usually that's around behavior management.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with me getting up and doing it is, even if it works momentarily, it works because of my personality and my approach that is almost unteachable.
You've already owned and processed that and digested it and kind of spit it back out as your own, not as what somebody else is doing.
And P.S., it doesn't always work either.
Right.
So there is no magic potion to this, and that is the problem. And so I think simultaneously what happens on the flip side is I wouldn't think to ask for your magic potion, because I can see that, and that happens a lot with, particularly again around behavior management. Some of the best ideas, and these are good ideas, they just don't always work, is to bring somebody to a classroom that's well managed. But what's behind that scene is so much foundational work and so much time that taking a that first day teacher and saying, wait, don't leave. You can take the day off tomorrow from teaching and we'll go to different classrooms and you can observe practice and learn. Those are great ideas and good things to do. But what they're watching is the end result of so much work that seems so seamless and easy that's the next piece of overwhelmingness.
Right.
Is
how
like, how would I ever get there? Yeah, exactly. So, so really let's go.
And I will say, just to add, it doesn't always work because of the different groups of kids you have.
Of course.
My sixth period class is not the same as your third period class. Your sixth period class is not the same as your third period class. So
the first thing I learned as a middle school teacher was post recess / lunch / gym, whole different learning environment from the smells.
That is a euphemism. Right.
To the food, the nutrition, the way it impacts people's brains and bodies. Back to the smells again.
Yeah.
Many a day spent reminding students to bring deodorant. Which, listen,
God's work you're doing.
Right? Yeah. But if it affects me, I have to believe it's affecting someone else.
Sure.
And so I'm dealing with, like we say, it is such that the job would be so easy if it wasn't for the kids, right? But for the X factors, the variables, and you can't account for all of them. So our goal here in Dumplings Over Flowers is to talk about basically the old proverb, and I'll mathify the old proverb of fishing. And it's not just about, in that case, they were teach a man to fish and they'll have
I hope we have a really cool sound effect for when you just said I'll mathify something.
Waterman. Pull up a sound effect.
Mathify.
Yeah. So I'll mathify the idea of the fishing story about, catch a fish, or give a man a fish, or teach him how to fish. And what I always talk about is I'm not trying to teach students how to solve a problem. I'm trying to teach them how to approach every problem. And if we look at it from that vantage point in terms of teaching, now we're talking about Dumplings Over Flowers. We're not checking boxes of board configurations and this, that, and the other. We're putting those things together and saying, why does that even matter?
Right.
People who are, I guarantee, much smarter than me. I'm not sure about much smarter than you, but guaranteed much smarter than me have seen the connections that can be made in all of these structures and systems and devices and put them together in a way that makes the learning environment one that can account for just about everything.
So support, we have covered, right?
Yeah.
If you see someone who you would like to get support from or need a particular kind of support, et cetera, right? We reach out to those people. Resources, there are so many great options for resources out there. Not the least of which.
Are there? Oh, well, you're not going to plug.
Of course I'm going to.
Mosaic, our sponsor?
Our sponsor and our company.
Waterman, roll the tape. No, there's no tape.
There's no tape. There's just us. Mosaic Instructional Planning is the company that Izzy and I co-founded. And it is our lesson planning software that lives in the cloud that takes teachers every step of the way.
Why did you emphasize that it lives in the cloud?
Well, I'll tell you.
Go ahead.
Because this morning we had some.
Did Waterman tell you?
We had some issues with the weather here, and a tornado siren was going off, which is not something I experience in my life in New York. But I am down in Dallas.
Yeah.
The land of sirens, I guess. And I knew it was bad because you all said,
I was trying
there's an actual siren. Oh no,
I don't hear the siren much either. So hearing the siren,
saying,
got everybody's attention.
If you think about the disaster that could happen if you have your lesson plans not in the cloud,
I thought
tornado could wipe them out. Whatever.
I thought you were going to go to hacking, which happened in a district in New York.
Same that the proverbial tornado that is cyber attacks.
Yeah,
for sure. But it lives in the cloud. So you don't have to worry about any of that.
Truth.
Or you could do it from your shelter in the basement. But Mosaic is exactly what we're talking about. And it's an extension of who we are and what we've done and our time in the classroom and our experience as instructional coaches and teachers. So Mosaic is a cloud-based lesson planning platform that offers support, resources, and training for teachers at every decision point of a lesson plan.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are out there and looking for the kind of mentorship that we had,
Right,
and still have,
truth,
as siblings and teachers, but as mentors and teachers, you can get that in Mosaic, even if you're alone in a tornado shelter.
Yeah, and because really, what happens a lot, what I got a lot of. And I believe it's one of the topics on the wheel. And we'll get into more depth if and when we spin and hit that topic. But there's so many different ways. In fact, there's probably, for as many teachers, there are as many different ways to approach teaching and learning. But there are some absolutes to stand on. And then there's all the stuff that has to get disseminated into choices that I get to make. That's a daunting task. And here's one of the most important ones. How do I differentiate the scripted lesson I'm given and add some choice around that to make it more relatable, more authentic, and more relevant to my students, which changes behaviors, which changes learning atmosphere, which changes everything. So really, everything that you're going to, is always going to tie back for us to the plan. And the action plan. And so really, without being cliche in the least, this is work that we have thoroughly vetted, and it's not about product. It's about the fact that through the years, we recognize that all these philosophies, all these great ideas need to be disseminated in a way that's relevant and that creates an experiential process and procedure, so students have a really high quality lesson in front of them. And teachers have the option to level the playing field. We talked a lot about learning loss in pandemic. There was a lot of teacher loss in pandemic, not just losses in attrition, right? But skills and processes.
Certainly in motivation, morale, support. I mean,
and now, and as a result, right, we have added mandates. Now we have to consider more, some of it's good. To consider more intentionally, let's say, different ways to work relationship over content and all that, right? So how do we do that and do everything we have to do, and we don't have time, and we get it? And so really what I guess we're going to have to do is come back again for another round of this, because that's the stuff we're going to get into, and that's why we're calling this Dumplings Over Flowers. You want to go back into that story a little bit before we?
Yeah. So Dumplings Over Flowers, first of all.
Shout out to Maximilian.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Shout out to dumplings is what I was going to say.
Well, true.
If you want me to start the story.
When I heard the story, I texted Nicole right away and I wrote Dumplings Over Everything.
Yeah. We happen to be dumpling lovers. Yes. And that's why we chose this name.
Truth.
No.
Wait, I said truth.
Well, it's not untrue that we love dumplings, but Dumplings Over Flowers is recently something we heard beautifully said by our friend Max, who it's a Japanese proverb. So he said it in Japanese. I won't even attempt.
No.
I will not attempt.
No.
But basically the idea of substance over appearance, or reality over fantasy, or
how about in teacher world
over abstract,
or in teacher world, reason over checkbox. Why am I doing this? Do I have to?
Reason over checkbox is not as catchy. However,
I don't know. I like it.
But that's what we hope to accomplish here on the podcast. And we have more stories where this one came from. So we hope you'll join us again.
Hey everybody, this is the unseen but ever-present Waterman. Thank you for listening to Dumplings Over Flowers. Our current plan is to have new episodes every other week, so be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube or follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube or on social by searching Dumplings Over Flowers or @DumplingsPod. That's @DumplingsPod. Also, don't be afraid to leave a comment on our YouTube channel. Your comments, questions, or stories may very well inspire the conversation in our next episode. If you would like to know more about our cloud-based lesson planning platform, you can visit mosaicip.com. Once again, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.